Namaste, loves, and welcome, welcome, welcome. We are working through the muscle section of your teachables. So if you'd like to follow along, you're more than welcome to go ahead and open up your programs. And if you're listening along, then go ahead and do the same. There's no need to really see anything as I'm unable to share the screen. But what's most important for you all is that there are key phrases and key components that you want to have a really thorough understanding of in terms of keywords and terminology. What's really important is that we're understanding the insertion points and the origins of where the muscles basically start and where they intersect and what they govern. A couple of keywords that you're going to want to know that will be on your quiz that will go over the information is going to be the origin and the insertion, as well as the agonist, or what is considered a prime mover, and an antagonist, which is a muscle that relaxes while the agonist is contracting. And I know these sound very unfamiliar now, but as you begin to have a much better understanding of the anatomy and physiology of the body, it will come very, very, very naturally. I don't expect you to have it memorized. Of course, I continue to also look at things and research and continue to grow my own personal development with anatomy and physiology. So I would understand and expect you to do the same as you progress on your teacher training journey or your holistic and medical journeys. The last key word you're going to learn is the synergist, and the muscle that assists and fine-tunes the action of the agonist, but which can also be used to produce the same action, although it's generally not as efficiently. And so the textbook that we use in this portion of the program is the Key Muscles of Yoga by Ray Long. And it's a really, really, really helpful book. And we use volume 1, and I give you all of the page numbers that you can go through. And the best way to learn everything in anatomy is to practice the poses that go along with each muscle group that we're learning. So if you were to go into, for example, the quadriceps section, and I tell you there to go to page 96 through 100 in your book, and then you have some principles. You'll have the rectus femoris, the vastus intermedius, the lateralis, and all of these issues. And so once you have an idea, you actually can physically apply it to yourself. So you can look at your leg, you can look at your thigh, and you can then start to see, oh, this is the vastus medialis, and this is the femoris. And the femoris is very similar to the word femur. So the muscle is the femoris, but the bone is the femur bone. And so it kind of makes sense. You know, when we really come down to it, it's a lot of common sense and application. So listening to the words, listening to the root of the word, and then understanding where it resides in the human body. And then once you have this kind of understanding of the visual perspective, then it becomes so much more easier to then apply it when you're doing your practice. And so, for example, I put here a couple of poses that will be helpful for you. No pictures. I want you to actually do some research and dive in to understanding what these poses are from the Sanskrit term. Practice the Sanskrit term. I don't expect you to memorize the Sanskrit term. Over time with practice, it will come naturally again, but at least you have an understanding of what the Sanskrit term is, and then you'll understand what the English term is, or the respective language that you feel most comfortable speaking in. So the Trianga Mukhapada Paschimottanasana is the one where we sit on the heel of the bent leg, but the other leg is extended in front of us. And so, for example, and I'll just move my chair and I'll go on the ground and I'll show you what that is so you have an understanding of that, okay? So if we are in Paschimottanasana, Paschimottanasana is the legs are extended out long in front of us, correct? And this is known as extreme east to west posed, and we will be coming forward folding. In the example of Trianga uses half of Vajra, which is when we take one of our legs and we take it underneath and we sit on that leg. So the knee is bent, and here the extended leg is flexed. So this is the half of the Paschimottanasana. And then we come into the forward fold. So here we're working through the quadriceps on both legs. We're also working on the hamstring and the iliopsoas, which is here, because this is all connected. And so this is a very powerful pose. It's mostly practiced in Ashtanga asanas, and this is where you get quite a divine stretch. And to balance out both sides, so that way I'm not awkward, I'll do it on the side as well. And so that we're balancing out Ha and The, so the sun and the moon. And then you want to sit on the heel here, so the iliacus of your bones, of the tailbone itself, you're sitting on it on your heel. And when you're flexing your foot, you're activating the iliopsoas, which connects from the lower lumbar spine, wraps around the pelvic girdle, wraps around through your hip bone and the femur, and then it wraps around the knee, and it continues. It's a very long muscle, but it's also a very powerful muscle, because this is where we at times might have some sensitivity in the body, where we get lower back pain and strain, hip issues, if one hip is higher than the other, how that impacts it, how it affects it. And so this particular pose is actually one of the best poses to practice in readjusting and realigning this particular area of the body. And I would always encourage, of course, to utilize your tools such as blankets, and as well as utilizing the bolsters and the blocks, so that you can elevate for someone that has a little bit of sensitivity, because you are actually sickling your foot. And I'll turn to the side so you can see what's happening here. Maybe that might be better. So you can see my foot is slightly sickled here, okay? And I'm sitting on the heel of my foot. So that means what exactly? We talked about this before when we had Madeline on camera, that our the tibia is being turned. And so when it's turning, it's causing a little bit of aggravation if your knees are not ready for that kind of movement. So that is why I highly encourage you to elevate the hips for somebody that's a little more sensitive here. And that way they're not putting so much strain on the ankle, okay? So that is what I wanted to explain to you and to demonstrate that particular asana. And it is in the postures within your book that you have, okay? Now, the other thing to keep in mind when learning about this particular area of muscles and bones is that everything is now working very, very beautifully together. And so you're understanding the structure and the kaphic portion of the practice. Kapha dosha is really focused on our, bear with me, I'm almost talking too fast for myself. So kapha dosha is responsible for structure, lubrication, and cohesion. And so we want to make sure that as we're working with the musculature of the body, that we're very, very mindful of the lubrication. And so how we lubricate the body is by movement and how we nourish ourselves. If we don't have a proper diet, then chances are your muscles are going to be a little more emaciated. And so this we find a lot in our senior community. Seniors tend to be very, very fragile, very, very dry, brittle. And these are our qualities that have to do mostly with Vata dosha. And their Agni is not as heated. They eat very, very light foods. Maybe they don't eat that much at all. And so it's for that reason that their bone structure and their muscles start to get very, very soft and deteriorated. And they're not as, they don't work out as much maybe. And then they also are prone to falling, imbalance, and so on. when we get into this portion of anatomy, this is the most important part because we want to create more strength for our seniors and for those that are a little softer around these edges. And this is where we want to increase their strength by giving them gentle movements. And so we're giving them a sense now to understand visually what their bodies are doing by giving them instructions on how to do bicep curls and what the functionality is, what their body is doing, so that it's creating these little muscles for them to sustain and stabilize themselves. It's really important when we're focusing on the muscle groups such as the quads and such as the lower back muscles, the erector spinae, which is within the spine, and the latissimus dorsi. We want our student groups to understand the reason why we focus so much on certain poses and asanas, because they're establishing strength and creating strength for them to enliven the inner intelligence of their body, as we talk about a lot in Ayurveda. And so this component of your teacher training, I will encourage you to spend a lot of time on and go through and become your own case study. Okay, utilize a journal, write in your Kriya Yoga logs. Maybe today you take this portion of the practice and you go into each one of these poses, you go into your book and you look at, okay, Trianga. You have your manual, which I don't believe I included Trianga in there, but I did include Paschimottanasana. And so you have your e-manual that you can look at the benefits, the muscle groups that we utilize. Within the asana practice, you can also go back to the asana portion of this teacher training and look at the specific pose, look at the video, practice along with me, and then write some notes. What did you do to maybe facilitate it to be of ease and comfort, or give yourself a little more oomph to add a little more strengthening to it? What were maybe some tools that you applied as well? So if you think about it like that, you start to break it down easier. And this will be a really great way how to teach your students and yourself different types of modalities that will help to create more accessibility for the respective posture. And Uttanasana, when we do the Uttanasana forward fold, are we doing it with a straight leg or are we doing it with a slightly bent knee? Because if we do it with a slightly bent knee, then you'll understand how the quad along with the iliopsoas work hand in hand together, and because the iliopsoas is connected to the lower back. And so when you're in that forward fold concept, you're going to start to notice if it's straining because the legs are straight and hyperextended, and if you're alleviating it because the knees are bent. Anytime you want to reduce any friction in the lower back, you immediately want to start with bending the knees. And then we progress from there. You bend the knees, engage the thigh muscles, and those thigh muscles being what we just talked about, vastus lateralis, the rectus femoris, and then the vastus medalis. And so each of them, along with adduction, abduction, you start to have now a visual, you start to visualize your body engaging and the muscles rotating and moving along with you as you're beginning to become very conscious, much more conscious of your practice, now that you're getting to see the inner workings of your body and what's happening throughout each of your poses, each of the asanas. It is one of the biggest reasons why I always preach and I always say that visualize your practice, consciously enter into the pose, consciously exit out of the pose, really have a thorough understanding of how the body is opening up itself. When we open up the chest, when we roll the shoulders back, visualize the body articulating these movements so that you can see how conscious it really is when you're applying the upward movements, the rolling of the shoulder back, the reaching up towards the sky, the bending of the elbow. You're actually seeing the muscle and the bones working hand in hand together here. And that makes you stand out different than any other yoga teacher or any other vanilla cupcake, because you are very conscious of the application of how you're teaching and how you're moving the body, so as to reason why I'm going from an open hip to a closed hip. Maybe I stay closed hip because I don't want to add any strain in my students' hip flexor joint. Maybe we're preventing them from getting a hip replacement. If you go into statistics and studies, you'll notice that many yoga teachers that practice what we call and consider the power vinyasa lineage end up 9 out of 10 times having to end up getting hip replacements as they get older. And so to avoid that, especially, and this is why I have created this particular yoga teacher training, is so that you're practicing conscious, you're understanding why not to go consistently from close to open, close to open, close to open, because over time it creates a friction. And like anything else, if like a rubber band, if you stretch it too much, what ends up happening is it remains stretched and loose. It never will go back to its shape again. And so what we want to avoid is that elasticity that just it gets so flexible that students have to go deeper to feel something. They have to do more repetitions to gain that strength again. And what we're working towards within this musculature is to create a housing component that kaphically builds a structure of stability without causing harm, but educating and informing the body how important it is to do less to gain more. Okay, so this is why it's very important to understand these key terminologies of the origin, the insertion point, who the antagonist is, the synergist is, why we do these things, because we want to understand physiologically how important it is to create sustainability and health so that as we age, we're progressing instead of regressing. Okay. I'll leave you with that for now. There's much to go over in each of the segments, but just keeping in mind that you are thoroughly guided through each of these portions within the major muscle groups so that you can have a very good understanding, so that you can apply this to not only your personal practice, but to those that you will empower and enliven within your own journeys. Now, as you continue down the road here with the muscle groups, you will see I have put for you key yoga asanas, okay? And then those yoga asanas, you'll also see them within your textbook and within the e-manual that I've created for you, as well as the videos that explain each of them. And then what you'll also do is you'll write down, for example, Virabhadrasana 2, and then you'll write down any modifications you made, whether you used a wall, whether you did it in the water, whether you did it on land, and what tools you used to support yourself and stabilize, what you learned from it, what key muscle areas were most impacted, what you felt energetically, and what you think you need to do to either empower and enliven or maybe regress a little bit because it was too much. And continue to work like that through each of the asanas, and that will create more of a guidance. When we meet in person, be it either live on video or in the yoga studio, I'm going to encourage you to bring that journal with you. And this way, when we get into this portion of the series, we can actually talk about how and what and why, all of these functionality points, and we can learn together and grow together as we explore each of these asanas. This will be a really wonderful way as well for you to curate and to inform how to create your own yoga sequences. And then when you're making your sequences, much more consciously understanding what chakras, which in the Key Muscles by Ray Long, he actually speaks about what chakras are ignited and illuminated throughout the muscles when you're doing your yoga practice. So it's very, very informative. I highly recommend you're using this book, and I'm looking forward to seeing you and chatting with you and growing with you and nurturing you on this yoga journey. Namaste, y'all, and I will see you very, very soon.